Come spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and I was supposed to be interviewing Blake DeRusha about his film 50 Years of Fantasy tonight. However, Blake accidentally double-booked himself. Apparently, he is podcasting with at least 3 other Ryans at some point on his schedule, so he got a whole bunch of us confused with each other. I know there are certainly some Ryans that I hope he is not conducting interviews with, but that is neither here nor there. Anyway, so this is kind of a off-the-cuff, last-minute stream here because, I took so much time off in July. I didn't really want to take any time off in August. And there's a couple topics to discuss here tonight. So, we're going to dive into a few of them. Before we do, I want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. That's the best way to let people know what we're doing out here on Rollin Bones. It's really is the best way to support the show. Just give us a little bump in the algorithm. Let people know that we're out here still doing what we're doing. Of course, you can also follow us on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram, where I am at Howard_Ryan Gregg. YouTube is Rollin Bones, and Twitch is twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan. And then Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. There is an article coming up sometime in the next week or so about melee duels. I'm excited for it. It's really gotten me thinking about different things. And I know that's a very vague way to say things, but I'm actually going to circle back around to that topic at the end of this particular stream. So we're going to put a pin in that for right now and move on. So, couple things have happened over the past few weeks, just as far as topics that have come up over the course of RPG Twitter and other places. And appropriately enough, Dundermoose in chat is listening to this while he's rolling up an Appendix A dungeon, because our first topic tonight is going to be the ongoing discussion about this idea of dungeon ecology, dungeons having to make sense versus the mythical underworld conception of dungeons. So to dig in and kind of explain both approaches, because both are actually addressed by Gygax himself. Gary seems to take this opinion of you do one or the either. You can vary it between dungeons. One can be naturally occurring and have its own ecosystem. Another one can be a purely magical realm, but you have to essentially commit to it within the dungeons. So if random things are popping up, randomly, you're trapped in some kind of mythic underworld, some kind of explanation as to who's pulling the strings here, the evil wizard behind it all, or the demon, or, whoever that's got to come up at some point. And then the other idea, like if you're saying, okay, this is a dungeon that makes sense and has an ecology, you should probably go into that. That's really kind of where Gary lands on the issue. And to cite my sources there, you can find that on, I believe, page 87. Yes, page 87 of the AD&D First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide. I was actually reading that right before we jumped on here tonight. But yeah, that's kind of the debate that's been going on. And there have been a couple interesting takes, and there have been a couple completely brain dead takes. And I kind of wanted to give my opinion here. One of the best takes that I've seen from this comes from our good friend John Mollison. Mr. Wargaming on Twitter and YouTube. Great guy, been on the show before. I always love to hear his thoughts on gaming. But the way that he put it, he kind of illustrated his point with a picture of a castle just coming up out of the ground. And I believe it was a real photo, if I'm remembering the tweet correctly. I could have pulled it up beforehand, but I didn't. So here we are. It was a picture of a castle covered in moss and foliage. And he said, is this just a normal castle, or is this some kind of mythical evil space? And then, people in replies were, giving their thoughts on it. And some people were saying, yeah, I live in the UK and it's normal to just see abandoned castles out in the wilderness. And some people were saying this place looks evil as hell. And each of his responses kind of reinforced this idea of whichever one you commit to, whichever path, you need to be ready to play out the second order effects of your choice. I believe those were his exact words. You have to actually play out the second order effects of, the choice that you make or the result that you roll on the table. And a lot of times, and I know John runs his games this way. A lot of those of you who watch the show run your games this way. If you're rolling on a random table, inevitably you're going to come across results that don't necessarily make sense with each other. There's, again, two approaches to how you handle this. One approach is you go, that doesn't make any damn sense, and you ignore it. I kind of consider that the coward's way out. And I have done that before. And I will give an example of when I've done that before and regretted it in just a second. The other option is to roll with it. You just, yes, you are wandering through this abandoned castle and you come across a shark. You somehow wander into like waist deep water and you can see there's a shark fin out there in that water and it's getting deeper and deeper. Most people, if they roll, a shark on a wandering monster table in the middle of a castle, they're going to panic and say, no, I'm not doing that. But you have this interesting element that is introduced where there's a flooded passage and for some reason there's a shark in it. Where did that thing come from? And so here's what I will use my example of a time where I fudged a roll and regretted it. It was in a Night Haven campaign, one that ended up dissolving, unfortunately. But we were doing city encounters, and I had built out this table of just kind of random happenstances that players could run into as they were walking through the city, just so that, walking the city streets actually gave you kind of a lived-in feel for Night Haven. That's a thing that I care about. It's going to be in Rick's Codex Volume 1. It'll be in all my Night Haven stuff moving forward. But the result that I rolled was you are walking down the street and you see in a dark alleyway a man being dragged into the shadows screaming, help, help, it's got me. And then you roll a random monster encounter to determine what that thing is using the encounter table of your choice. I was running in Castles and Crusades at the time. So I roll on the Castles and Crusades random encounter table and I get a gnome. And the circumstances that I had envisioned in my head was that this would be some kind of undead creature or some kind of, eldritch horror tentacle monster type thing. And so I see a gnome and I'm just like, what the hell? And so just one spot down from there was ghoul. And so I was just like, it's a ghoul. You see a ghoul dragging this homeless man into the shadows. And my players were just like, ugh, icky, and ignored it. Just left the random ghoul on the street. As soon as they did that, though, I immediately had an idea. I immediately, just in my head, I came up with an idea. I was like, okay, so in Night Haven, gnomes are very technically gifted. What if there's some kind of gnomish serial killer that just kind of sets up these like saw killer traps? And so this thing's being like dragged into an alleyway by these grappling hooks. And there's a gnome with a dagger, like waiting for him on the other side. And the players, don't know what it is, but they see this machine pulling, pulling this homeless guy into this dark alleyway. That's infinitely cooler. That's an infinitely more interesting idea than just a ghoul attack. And I didn't come up with it. The table came up with it. And I was too cowardly to implement that at my table. I thought, I did not have great control over this table. Like I said, this group eventually fell apart. So I thought, like, I'm going to completely lose my credibility if I do this. And to this day, I regret not doing. Now, I don't think that group would have appreciated any kind of machinations I could have made up around, some kind of serial killer gnome or zombie gnome or something like that, dragging this homeless guy into an alley. They probably would have ignored it anyway. Just they were that kind of group. But as Rex Teal says here in chat, why does this thing exist and why does it do this? You're explorers. How about you do some exploring and figure it out? Not everything has to have an immediate answer. And he also points out here, you don't need an answer until the players interact with it. And the more they interact with it, the more answers you will get. So yeah, I didn't even need to come up with serial killer gnome on the spot. I did. I should have just gone with it. Because, had the players seen, or had I described it to the players, maybe they would have explored it, and then you could have some answers along the lines of, oh yeah, this gnome is, Dr. Hannibal Gnomler, or I just came up with this one too, H.H. Gnomes. For those of you who are deep into serial killer lore, you might get an appreciation of that. I'm not even drinking. And, but yeah, that's, when you have random stuff like that happen in the dungeon, it makes for a more interesting experience. It just does. I've talked about this before. There is no need to make everything make sense, because if you think of the dungeon in terms of it's a mythical underworld, it is a kind of place where dark magics coalesce, or it is a meeting place between planes. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with that, and then suddenly those random results on the table, it doesn't matter so much that they don't quote unquote make sense. Okay, this creature wouldn't be found in this biome that we find ourselves in. Who cares at that point? And I've even described this myself, and I think this is an interesting way to view dungeons. They're a liminal space, and I know that's a liminal space is a weird kind of thing to mention these days. It's I can't remember who it was in Basic Experts Gilded server. I think it might have been John TGG. But someone said liminal spaces, aka Zoomers being afraid of a hotel lobby. But when you think about what a liminal space is, it is an in-between. It's a kind of a space between worlds. I think of in The Magician's Nephew, the C.S. Lewis Narnia book, The Magician's Nephew, there is a world between worlds. There's this endless forest that when you put the, I believe it's the yellow rings, when you put the yellow rings on that Uncle Andrew made, you go into this world between worlds. It's an endless forest, and there's all of these pools that kind of line this forest. And when you enter the pools wearing your ring, you are transported into another world. But there is this, this space between, this liminal space that you inhabit. And Crafty Met is in the chat. Your mom is the greatest creature to inhabit the dungeon. Yep, every dungeon needs your mom, from Rex Teal. And to finish out the trifecta, Crafty Matt again. Would your mom's bed be considered a mythical underworld? Crafty. I love you. I love you. Anyway, your dungeon is a liminal space because however you play it out, whether it's just a hole in the ground that things are pouring into, whether it's someplace that's been literally cut off from the material plane by dark magic, you have a space that is separated from other spaces. You have this kind of isolated, hermetically sealed chamber filled with otherworldly horrors. And even if you do have a dungeon that quote unquote makes sense ecologically, if it's underground or if it's an abandoned castle or something like that, it's still a liminal space because it's now being invaded by kind of the underworld and the overworld. It exists in two places. So that's kind of how I like to think of the dungeon. And honestly, what it comes down to is no, you do not have to literally plan out every single ecological factor of your dungeon. I like simulationism. You guys have heard me talk about simulationism a lot on the show. You all know that I have come to greatly appreciate that concept. However, there's simulationism, and then there is I think I'm God and I have created this little world that like every nook and cranny has already been mapped out, everything has already been explained, everything has already been explored. The only way I know of to describe this is I was talking to one of my youth group students a while back, and he found out that I was into D&D. He was talking about, fantasy novels and stuff like that. And this is the kind of guy who spends a lot of time on the internet, too much time on the internet. He really could benefit from touching grass. And I've told him as much, both gently and not so gently. But anyway, he was explaining to me this world that he was building. And that's how he put it. He said, I'm building this fantasy world. I said, okay. Why? And he said, well, I like building fantasy worlds, and so I'm building this world. I'm having trouble with the magic system. I'm trying, and he starts going into this in-depth explanation of this weird magic system that's somewhat based on physics. Again, like we are in this was almost like what I think an Autism Speaks ad should actually be, was this kid trying to explain to me how like his magic system lined up with real world physics and stuff like that. You could just put the puzzle piece up over top of it, and like that's what I was in the middle of. I found myself in this situation before. And so finally I stop him and I go, hey, let's go back to my earlier question. Why are you building this world? Are you going to run a game in it? Because if so, you don't need to explain all of this. Your players will explore this. And he goes, no, I'm not going to run a game in it. I was like, well, are you going to write stories set in this world? Because if you're going to write stories set in this world, you've started at the wrong point. I think you need to think more about character and character motivation and the story that you're trying to tell, instead of turning into like the Albert Einstein of this world and just trying to map out every single pathway. Why don't you create an interesting narrative if you're going to turn this into a series of stories? And he goes, oh, no, I'm not any good at writing narratives. And then just continues talking about this world. And I'm like, you're using so much bandwidth. You are uh, using so much creative energy on something that no one but you is ever going to interact with. This is wasted creative potential. And when you have to explain what the monsters eat, or where they use the bathroom, as my thumbnail demonstrates, the beholder toilet. If you find yourself having to explain that stuff, or you think like, this is so important to my game and my players, no, it's not. It's really not. No one cares. No one cares at all. And if they do, then you can make something up on the fly. Like, is your player really going to get mad? Are they going to go on RPG horror stories on Reddit and post about how you didn't give enough detail about where the ogre takes a dump? No. And if they do, then even the cretins on Reddit are going to downvote them into oblivion and just be like, why do you care? Just have fun. Just these days in RPG horror stories would be like, just run a coffee shop or something. But yeah, it's good for Mike here in chat. Mike, welcome. Glad that you could make it. People need to run more games. Yes. Yeah. And that's what it gets down to. One of the big voices that was contributing to this just absolute mess, and really kind of the way that I was introduced to this resurgence of this mythical underworld versus dungeon ecology conversation, is a guy who has attempted on multiple occasions to run these kind of massive sprawling games, and every single time has failed because he was doing the wrong kind of prep. He was, trying to make sure that all of his kind of weird nooks and crannies and details were all filled out so that you could, go to wherever and have something to do, but he wasn't actually reading the rules. So his games just kind of crashed and burned. And, he had not one, not two, but like 67 meltdowns. Yes, Vic, I'm talking about the Crab Man. Harmony is in chat. Harmony, we're not talking about you. Go away. Apparently I say Scootifer weird, but anyway, yeah. When it comes to thinking about dungeons, and I honestly, I go back to what Dundermoose said earlier. He's rolling on Appendix A. That's all you need to do. That's really all you need to do. Roll an Appendix A and see what the results are. And if something weird comes up, then if your players call you on it, just roll with it. Be like, yeah, that's what I said. There's a shark in the castle. It's filled with water at this point, and you just keep wandering down into this pool, and you can see like there's shark fins in there. There's sharks all around. Or hell, if you don't want there to be water in the dungeon, then you've got sharks walking around, bipedal sharks. I don't know. Yeah, they're street sharks. Wasn't that a TV show in the early 90s? Wasn't there something called Street Sharks where there were literally like shark street toughs? I don't know. Do something like that. Just be like, yeah, this wizard was fusing sharks and orcs together. They're shorks. Yeah. Or Vic has a great, floating shark equals wizard wouldn't have a magical aquarium zoo and enchanted everything to live in the air. Yeah. Sweet. So yeah. There you go. Land sharks. This is Jimmy Buffett's dungeon. These are land sharks. At the end of this, you will have to find the lettuce, tomato, Heinz 57, and French fried potatoes and bring them to the shrine of the wizard Buffett and stack them together on the tray that he's holding in his hands. And only then will the guitar open up and inside you will find the lost shaker of salt that you were looking for. Because unfortunately the wizard forgot that he put it there. It was in fact his own damn fault. So yeah, there you go. There's like 6 different explanations for why there's a shark in your castle. Yeah, come on. That's really all there is to it. So yeah, like I wonder sometimes why people take this hobby so seriously in that regard. Like, yes, you should take things that you do seriously and strive to do them well. But there are things that when you try to take them too seriously, you end up missing the forest for the trees. And this is one of them. When you have to explain, how air circulates through the dungeon because, hey, at a certain point, you're going to run out of oxygen when you get far enough down. So, a 12 level dungeon doesn't really seem all that logical to me. Shut up. Go outside, nerd. That kind of stuff, yeah. You guys are killing me tonight. Victor Gorchev, want to know how I got these scars? Sorry, let me do that right. You want to know how I got these scars? Mother wanted to know the ecology of my air shark. There you go. Orcus Dorcas, welcome, Scott. Glad you can make it. Buffett's blown out your flip-flop is a level 4 spell. Yes, and you can only find the scroll inside his Margaritaville dungeon. So yeah. Man. Some of the conversations that come up on RPG Twitter are wild. I feel like when... I like to imagine, like with all technology, when Twitter was conceptualized, the creator, whoever had the initial idea, and whether it was Jack or whether it was someone else, just came up with this idea. This is going to be a discussion forum. This is going to be a place where ideas are shared. Who maybe the next atomic bomb or the next internal combustion engine will be conceptualized via these conversations that we have on Twitter, and then they launch it and immediately just complete shenanigans. I imagine it was the same for like the first RPG person who thought, hey, we could have serious discussions about the rules using this new platform, Twitter. We could really get to the bottom of things. And now suddenly it turns into people fighting about whether or not a first level fighter is a veteran, and people arguing over whether or not you have to have individual lavatory holes dug on every level so that your monsters have a place to make deposits. And that's just the hellscape that we live in now. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. What? Actually, no. I say that. I do know. It's the same problem that we have really with all media. The people who are participating in it no longer live real lives. The people who are like driving these conversations, there is no praxis. They are beings of pure theory. Like Dunder is saying here in chat, the Bro SR right now, they're running Bronsteins using Shucked Oyster and Gangbusters, which Gangbusters Bronstein, that sounds amazing. I would love to see that. I love my gangster movies. What can I say? So there's kind of these 2 tiers of RPG discussions now. There are the theory cells, to use, to borrow a term. These are the people who they just read the books sometimes and argue with each other about stupid stuff. They're the people where you get the "so you hate pancakes" thing that Vic is talking about. Some guys posting about, hey, I really like waffles. Waffles are great. The little ridges on them, they really catch the syrup nicely. It's fantastic. They're great. And then some dude pops in and says, "So you hate pancakes?" they've got pockets in them. The pockets are just below the surface. They catch syrup just fine. I've never had a problem catching syrup on my pancakes. I want to know why you're out here with all this anti-pancake slander all of a sudden. You absolute so-and-so. And then it, devolves from there. Those people are not making pancakes or waffles. They're not experimenting with their batter to see what kind of characteristics they can get. Hell, some of them, just based on the way that RPGs seem to work, some of them probably have never even eaten a pancake. But they're going to argue about it. That's for sure. And then you've got people like the Bro SR. You've got people like TBE and Associates. You've got people who are actually playing games. You got people like Harmony, here in chat. Harmony posts about the games that she plays with her friends, and she discusses them on her stream. And a lot of the people, the theory cells, the theoretical pancake eaters, have never, they get so mad at us, those of us who actually play the game. And I say that as someone whose game is currently on an extended hiatus because life continues to get in the way of everything. I do try to play, though. They get mad at us because we are floating ideas of things that we've actually tried before. And of course, you have people like Crafty who will go over to the waffle side and be like, you guys are a bunch of morons, right? Everyone knows pancakes are better, and just throw a wrench in the works there. Yes, Harmony, you can stay now. I mentioned you. But yeah, I mean, like, all the discussions are stupid, and really, like, the rebuttal to all of them is just asking people, like, hey, when's the last time you played? When's the last time you tried this thing that you're mentioning? Because I was playing just the other night, and we had a situation come up like this, and this is how we resolved it. This is what the book says. We actually, we're looking through. Yeah, Scudder for Mike. Read the effing recipe. Exactly. Yep. Crafty Matt is the Alton Brown going over to the waffle camp and being like, if you actually read the recipe, you really should. You should know what's in this thing. Yeah. But yeah, like, I don't know. And this is the other thing, Vic brings up another good point. People like Vic and like Crafty, and I don't really joke on Twitter. I don't know why. I've just kind of turned Twitter into the place where I cut promos, I guess. But there are people who will post jokes, and then, in the words of the great Hulk Hogan, they work themselves into a shoot, brother. You have people who just can't handle this idea of something other than what they're used to. And this kind of brings me around to the other big topic that I want to discuss. And that is the current absolute state of role-playing games. We find ourselves in a really weird, interesting spot. The industry is kind of teetering on the edge of something not unprecedented, because this has happened before, but there's going to be some movement, some shifting. You guys have already seen it. You've already experienced it. A lot of you are here watching this show because we have experienced it together, or we've talked about it. It occurred to me as I was doing the dishes tonight. We are looking down the barrel of the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. You can pretty much divide that history in half at this point. It, like, literally is two perfect halves almost. because D&D was created in 1974, and WotC, Wizards of the Coast, bought TSR in 1999. So 25 years right there. Now, 25 years on, at the 50th anniversary, honestly, we're looking at the collapse of the WotC era. Because, as well as Magic the Gathering does for Wizards of the Coast, you look at it and you can only see diminishing returns at this point, especially on the D&D front. Like, yes, WotC moves Magic cards still, but D&D just can't continue to be a loss leader. At some point, they got to take a look at the books and go, hey, we were supposed to make money off this thing. Or, hey, we used to make money off of this thing. What happened? Now, I can tell you exactly what happened. You designed the book one way, and then everything else went in a different direction from that original way that it was designed. And you basically confused your audience and split everything up and created the OSR in a lot of ways. But, with WotC D&D kind of coming to a screeching halt, they can see the cliff from where they are, and it's, a little too late to apply the brakes and coast to the edge of the cliff. What are the alternatives at this point? Where does this hobby go from here? Because when you look at the 90s, when the slow collapse of TSR D&D was happening, when second edition was experiencing its kind of glut of splat books and things that things that really just kind of like drove consumers away. Just too many box sets, too much everything. There were alternatives. There were other places to go that were popular. Vampire, popular in the 90s. Cyberpunk. Vampire is kind of the big number two there. And some of you will definitely sound off in the comments here that Vampire is a big number two. I think you're wrong. I think Vampire's community is a big number two, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I don't see a clear number two here. You have Shadowdark. Shadowdark, it's a start. It's a beginning of something. It certainly hints at something, but it is not in and of itself. It's not Vampire. Not yet, at least. But, Malachi, I know, let's see. He mentions number two is Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu, it's interesting because technically you are right. By market share, Call of Cthulhu is still like the second biggest role-playing game. It's apparently huge, I think, in South Korea. A lot of people play Call of Cthulhu. Culturally speaking, Call of Cthulhu has not had the kind of the reach or the grip on the zeitgeist that Vampire has. And maybe there's an argument to be had there. But, Call of Cthulhu is, it's a number two. It has the big, Japanese market share. I think we all know why it does, Malachi. But, Crafty says he was playing Call of Cthulhu and Rifts. But at the end of the day, what you have with Call of Cthulhu, it's a different kind of fantasy than what's presented in Vampire or D&D. D&D is a very heroic fantasy. You are a badass with a sword, or you're throwing spells around. Vampire, you're a vampire. You're a creature of the night. You are extremely powerful. And yes, while it's very much focused on character interaction and stuff like that, I'm sure Crafty can tell you all kinds of stories about vampire games that happened in the 90s where it just turned into the leather trench coat and Uzi and katana variety hour because that was, the style of the time. You can kind of naturally funnel D&D players who are disgruntled with the game into vampire and be like, it's not fantasy in the sense of like, swords and wizards and stuff like that, but you still get to be badass, awesome character. You can wear your leather trench coat and dual wield your Mac 10s and spin around in a room and take people out, Max Payne style or something like that. But as Scudder for Mike says here in chat, you get stronger the longer you play in D&D. In Call of Cthulhu, you get weaker the longer you play because it that sanity mechanic is it's a bear right there. It puts the brakes on things. And that's the thing. Like, Call of Cthulhu is interesting. It's certainly cool. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I've enjoyed the couple games that I've gotten to play. I have now played Call of Cthulhu. It's not the same kind of fantasy that you're presented with in D&D. And so it's going to be popular. It's going to have its audience, but it's not going to it's not going to have that same stickiness that D&D has. Now, Sly Blue Demon mentions Pathfinder. Pathfinder was the clear number 2 15 years ago. I think Pathfinder's time has also come and gone because they did a lot of the same things wrong that Wizards did. They did some different things wrong too, but they have also they've also leaned into the identity politics and the things that have made a lot of people fatigued on D&D and its community. And honestly, like Pathfinder 2 is not a good game from what I've seen. I don't really see what it has to offer that's better than any of the competitors out there. Like if you want something crunchy that makes more sense, Axe is that's where it's at for me. Maybe that's just a personal thing, but I don't see Pathfinder as the clear number 2 anymore. It's not the competitor that it used to be. So, where do people go now? Now that Wizards of the Coast has pretty definitively dug its own grave and is now in the process of sitting in it and throwing dirt on itself. Do they go to the OSR? No. I don't think they go to the OSR. And it's for the simple reason that, the OSR, it's not a thing anymore. It's fulfilled its purpose. And honestly, the OSR has always had a shelf life on it because it's predicated on, hey, do you remember the 80s? Specifically, hey, do you remember a 12-year-old's conception of the way the game was run in the 80s instead of the way the game was supposed to be run in the 80s? And that's kind of all it is, unfortunately. There are a lot of good people doing cool things in the OSR, but that's all it is now. It's a ever dwindling, ever aging audience of people trying to cling to the fun they had as children. It's not going to be sticky for future generations. It is what it is. Dunder, I believe, jokingly is saying Daggerheart. Daggerheart, And I'll throw Draw Steel in there as well. The influencer core of games, the games that are being made by the people that used to make D&D videos, that are now they fancy themselves good designers. So I'll talk about Daggerheart first, and then we'll move on to Draw Steel. Daggerheart was designed by the guy who made Candela Obscura, and if you remember, Black Lodge's excellent post-mortem on that steaming pile of crap, it's not even playable. So, the guy releases a kind of a rip-off Victorian horror game that borrows from other better products, and he doesn't even put combat rules in it. It's an unfinished, unplayable mess. That guy is not going to now spearhead, the next frontier of RPGs. And then there's Matt Colville. Matt Colville is the funky Flashman. I've said it before. He is all showmanship. He is all big concepts and grand ideas. And when it comes to execution, everything is just a big mess, a big pile of nothing. It's puffed up and it looks impressive initially until you take just one layer deeper, closer look at it and realize, wait, there's nothing here, or wait, this doesn't make any damn sense. And I don't have a copy of it. I was going to dedicate this entire episode to just talking about the Draw Steel playtest rules that were put out, but I'm not backing that Patreon, and I don't have that. I don't have that PDF. I don't know where to get it, so I can't go over it in detail. But I have seen videos of people going over it, and yes, it's needlessly complicated. Matt Colville very clearly just wanted to retro clone 4th edition, but he also wanted to make something that was not D20, and basically just decided that he was going to go around his elbow to get to his asshole just for the sake of being different. and that's all there is to it. It is it's a man endeavoring to walk on his hands because walking on your feet is just too normal and boring. And for a man of Matt Colville's size, that is probably not a good idea. So, yeah, that's where that leaves us. Malachi, I love Pinnacle. You will not find a bigger Savage Worlds fan than me. I know the folks who run Pinnacle. Shane Hensley has been very kind to me over the years. He's been great. Pinnacle does not have the infrastructure to be bigger than it is right now, unfortunately. They're not in a position to capitalize on the market, where it is. They aren't. They just aren't, unfortunately. And that's, I don't think the Blacks are losing any sleep over that. I don't think Shane Hensley is losing any sleep over that. That's just, it is what it is. They're happy doing what they're doing. So I don't see Savage Worlds, really picking up the ball and running with it that way. And that is what it is. Would RPGs be in a better place if Shane Hensley got to decide kind of the future? Maybe. I like Shane. I think he's a good designer. I think he's a good writer. But that's just not going to happen, unfortunately. So where do we go? Where do we go from here? I've seen some people do some very interesting things. Shucked Oyster has been mentioned in chat here. Black Lodge is here in chat as well. They are, I love them. I think Shucked Oyster is on the right track. We have to start thinking about the game differently. We have to start presenting the game differently. We have to encourage people to take another stab at this concept of role-playing games from a different angle. And what I'm talking about specifically is encouraging the kind of play that you see in Shucked Oyster. Rex, yes. This is what I'm trying to do as well. This is the problem I'm trying to solve for my own bottom line, as well as everyone else's enjoyment. Yes, I would love to sit here and say I have found the way. I can't. I am not going to sit here and tell you that I am some kind of enlightened guru here. I am also a blind man trying to find the path. But I think I have an idea of where to go. And this is something that I've talked about with only a couple people. One of them is Wonky. But for a long time, I didn't want to design a system myself. I didn't think I was cut out to do that. And maybe I'm not. But I'm going to do it anyway. I am going to try and make my own system. I have already started on it. I've already come up with a working title for it, and I've started sketching out my ideas for it. I'll be talking a lot more about it. I'm calling it Project Skeleton because that's kind of my vision for it. This is going to be a system that holds up the kinds of games that you want to play. This is the backbone that is going to power kind of basically everything that Guts and Glory does moving forward. Once we get the kinks worked out, for right now, we're sticking with the system agnostic, D20 fantasy broadly mindset. And that's kind of the sandbox that we're going to be playing in until we can get this thing up and running. But that's where I'm coming from. I want to follow the example of people who have done cool things. I want to follow Black Lodge's example. I want to follow Kelsey Dion's example. I want to do stuff like what Basic Expert and Victor Gorchev have done. And what, to a large extent, even though I've said that the OSR is predicated on nostalgia, I think Old School Essentials has kind of carved out its own unique path that takes it at least in a different direction from other OSR games. It has created, if nothing else, an ecosystem that people enjoy designing for and playing in. So there's that. But this is what I'm looking for. This is the problem that I'm trying to solve now. Is where do RPGs go from here? And I'm looking at incorporating elements from games that I've enjoyed. I am looking at not reinventing the wheel. And this is my problem with the Matt Colvilles of the world. Matt Colville takes a look at the wheel and says, yeah, it works. But it's, everyone's seen a wheel before. What happens if I make it a square? That's different. That's, you've never seen it before. You've never seen a square wheel before. And someone's like, hey, Matt, we tried that square wheel thing a while back, and it was stupid, and it didn't work. And he goes, well, it's a square wheel, but we're going to sand down the corners of it, and it works a little bit better now. Like, it's better if it's round. Why not just make it round? He's like, no, we're going forward with the square wheel, but we sanded the corners down so it's not, square anymore. So it turns a little bit better. It's still creating giant bumps when it moves. You try to move anything fragile in it, and it's just doom, doom, doom still. They're not as sharp jolts, but it's like, no. Okay, we'll sand it down a little bit more. It's starting to look a little bit more circular, but it's still, I promise you, it's this is not the wheel. This is something very different. Doobly doo, blah, 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 make my voice go high, that kind of stuff. And people are just looking at it, scratching their heads, going, what on earth are you talking about? Well, this absolute spaz of a man that looks like the Penguin is flapping his arms around, talking about how great his non-wheel is. That's not what I want to do. I want to take a look at the wheel and say, that's a brilliant design. How can we take this brilliant design and apply it in other places? How can we combine it with other brilliant designs, other movement systems? How can we combine it with other vessels that it, is attached to and create something new? I'm not trying to throw any parts out. I'm not trying to throw the D20 roll out. I'm not trying to throw the attack roll out. I'm playing around with damage, so maybe I've thrown the damage roll out. I don't know. Again, early days, early stages, baby steps. But I'm taking a look at ideas that I found work well, or that I think are cool, or that I think could use a little bit of polish but could be serviceable. And I'm trying to see if I can make them work together. That's where I am with my project. And one of my priorities, as Dundermoose says, is design for no prep. Yeah, that's ultimately what I want to do, is give people a toolkit they can use to run adventures off the cuff. That's a priority for me because, I'm a father. I don't have a lot of time. There are other fathers out there that don't have a lot of time, and a game that allows you to run with very minimal prep, that's a good game, especially for people like myself, busy people with lives. And that's what it's going to come down to, is can we create something that is true to itself, true to its nature, something that is an intellectual pursuit, that is true to the ideals of fantasy, but not something that throws up weird walls that keep people on the outside from looking in. I'm not trying to, create the game for everyone, but I don't want to throw up arbitrary walls and be like, look, if you don't have 10 hours to commit to a single session of this, then, there's the door, bucko, get on out of here. Because that's not sustainable long-term. And that's what I'm looking at here, is long-term sustainability. So there's a lot of factors that are going in here. And like Crafty says here, yes, I want to walk the path, because we're at a stage where if you make one more photocopy, you're just going to have a piece of paper that's covered in black ink that's completely indecipherable. So now we have to go back to the source. Now we have to go back to the originals. We have to strip this thing apart, take out the pieces that have rotted or broken or, whatever analogy you want to use, find the ones that are still working and see how they fit within new pieces. I talked about this several months ago. This idea that creators used to take multiple concepts, multiple ideas from things that they liked and put them together and create something new. And I use the example of Star Wars. Star Wars took Kurosawa movies and Westerns and Dune and adventure serials, Flash Gordon, comic books, and threw them all together and shook them up and threw in a dash of the Joseph Campbell mojo and then hit the blend button and then, poured it into a cake tin, stuck it in the oven, and here we go. Now you've got Star Wars. And unfortunately, no one has taken Star Wars and, blended it with something else to create something. Everyone seems to either just make Star Wars but worse, usually with official branding behind it, or they try to take Star Wars and then add just a little dash of something, or add just a little something here or there, or take something out and say it's something new, but it doesn't, the recipe no longer comes together. It no longer holds up the way that it used to. No one has taken it, like, basically just stripped out everything and taken only the parts that they need and then mixed it with other parts and created something new. No new culture has been made from the pieces of the old culture. We're just trying to continuously keep this thing alive, just continuously shock the corpse back to life. And so that's what I want to avoid. I have made peace with the IPs that I love being dead. That has been kind of my journey over the past few years. Am I going to get mad that the new Batman cartoon sucks? Maybe for like a second. Am I going to get mad that the new Marvel movie looks like absolute garbage? Probably not. I've gotten my enjoyment out of those things, and the things that I enjoy still exist. We've got this crazy media age that we're living in. I've got a whole shelf full of comic books over here next to me that contain a lot of my favorite stories. I can buy, I've got Batman the Animated Series, the original, on Blu-ray downstairs. That's I have the media that I love. It's not going anywhere. They can't take it away. It's one of the more profound things that Alan Moore said. Someone asked if he got mad that people were ruining his works in adaptations, and he took them over to a shelf where he had copies of his books, and he goes, "They haven't ruined them or destroyed them. They're right there, you see? And if I want them, I can take them down off the shelf and I can read them." Usually Alan Moore's full of crap, but that's, an interesting concept that he elaborated on there. So yeah, these things are, they're still there. I still have my memories of them, and I still have the originals. I don't need new Star Wars or new Batman. They could stop making Batman comics tomorrow, and I would not shed a tear. I don't need new entries in the Assassin's Creed franchise. I own all the Assassin's Creed games that I love. I don't need I don't need new entries in franchises. I just I need someone to do something new. Although maybe I don't need someone to do something new. Maybe I need to do something new. And so that's where we are. And that's how I ultimately decided I don't need another edition of D&D. I don't need another Heartbreaker or Retro Clone. I need my take on role-playing games. Patty's Parlor. Everyone made fun of Zack Snyder for trying to make something cool out of a bunch of other stuff people like Star Wars. But people hate Zack Snyder because the internet tells them to. I've defended Zack Snyder before, and I've criticized Zack Snyder. And what I've come down to is that Zack Snyder is very good at making cool visuals. He's the greatest trailer artist of all time. He makes amazing music videos. But that's about it. I have defended Batman vs Superman before because I really liked the way that Ben Affleck portrayed Batman. Yeah, that honestly, I did like it. That being said, when you watch Batman vs Superman, even the director's cut, it reads like he ripped a bunch of pages out of different graphic novels and stapled them together with no rhyme or reason. The thing about taking pieces of things that people like and then reassembling them into something new, the pieces have to make sense. They have to make something that functions. Zack Snyder doesn't make something that functions. He makes, I'd say a Frankenstein's monster, but Dr. Frankenstein actually does get that thing to stand up off the table and walk around and be alive. He makes like Frankenstein, but there's arms where the legs are supposed to be, and it's able to take like 2 steps and then it trips and stumbles. And people point and go, "Look, he made it walk." And in reality, people are like, "Yeah, but he said he was going to make it actually like be alive, and it's dead now. So what do you do?" I've enjoyed some of his movies. I like 300. I still like 300. It's great. I like his take on Watchmen. I enjoy moments of his DC movies, but like Rebel Moon. Rebel Moon, from what I've seen, it's a dumpster fire. But yeah, that's my take on Zack Snyder. Stephen Clements in chat here. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe someday. I don't know. I don't know that people like Nighthaven enough for that, but maybe. Who knows? Curran McKenzie in chat here. Star Wars plus Warhammer 40K plus suck equals Rebel Moon. Yeah, I mean, again, Patty, I'm not going to watch Rebel Moon. I'm not interested in Rebel Moon. I've only seen clips of it. I have not experienced the full thing. But yeah, at the same time, there's a certain point where yes, you have to experience something to know fully what it's like. But then there's also the meme of the guy squatting, taking a crap, and the other guy pointing at him and going, "That looks like crap." And the other guy saying, "How do you know? It hasn't come out yet." I don't think this is a one-to-one time situation. I know somewhat of what I speak of. So, be that as it may. I don't think Rebel Moon is for me. Cursive Yig, I'm sorry, but one-to-one time chats will continue until play quality improves. So, yeah. But yeah, that's where we are. I want to see this medium continue. Role-playing games are wonderful. I firmly believe that role-playing games are a modern continuation of the tradition of oral history. The same way that Homer would gather a bunch of Greeks together and sing songs about Odysseus and Troy. That's what role-playing games are now. Role-playing games are our oral tradition. There's always going to be this aspect of humanity where we sit around and tell stories to each other, whether it's Odysseus not making it home for 30 years, or I caught a fish and it was this big and fought me the whole time, and I was trying to reel it in and it pulled a gun on me. Yeah, that's what role-playing games are. The new iteration of that. And so, like, they're going to continue. until we come up with something new, there, Dunder. Ginger Fraser, I hope you're still watching. You need to write that down. Shucked Oyster 2, the oral tradition. Yep. There we go. That's wonderful. Thank you, Dunder. Thank you. That makes my heart happy. But yeah, that's we need to carry this thing forward. We need to iterate on this concept. We need our new revolution as to what this medium can accomplish. Can I be a part of that? I'm gonna try. I'm gonna put my best effort into it. I'm gonna see if I can turn Project Skeleton into something that people really care about and want to play. I'm gonna see that, you know, Nighthaven and Bellefollow come to fruition. That's, you know, those are my goals. And I hope there's a broad audience out there that loves both of them, so that, you know, not only can I release work that people actually care about, but hell, maybe I can even feed my family with this work. Maybe I'm not, maybe I can do this for a living. But yeah. We'll see. We'll give it the old college try. And Scudder for Mike, no one spits better than Dunder, considering that he said the oral tradition. Maybe maybe you're on to something there. All right. Well, that's pretty much what I had today. That's what I wanted to talk about. You know, we talked a little bit about the absolute state of RPG discourse. We talked about Zack Snyder. we talked about my thoughts on, you know, the future of role-playing games and what I want to contribute to it. I will be talking more about Project Skeleton the more I work on it. I'm probably going to do short videos where I kind of do what I was doing tonight, just rant into the camera, but with no chat, just kind of, you know, get ideas out there and work through them. And you know, that's what I'm looking at moving forward. Guts and Glory continues. Nighthaven continues. Bellefollow continues. And whether Project Skeleton just turns into some kind of engine that can power those things, or it turns into something bigger, remains to be seen. But that's what I'm looking at right now. And outside of my own work, I do want to continue to, you know, I don't have to tell anyone how great Shadow Dark is. It won a boatload of Emmys. It's the game du jour right now. You all know it, but one thing I can continue to push is Shucked Oyster, because that's the kind of game that I think is going to carry people forward. The kind of game where you give people in-depth ideas about, you know, a setting, about you know, characters and factions they can interact with, and then just turn them loose. That's the kind of stuff that people are really going to be able to sink their teeth into. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to create. And that's, you know, to me, that's the next iteration. That's the future. So let's go out there and build it together. When and where I'll be testing Project Bones, I'll keep you guys posted. I'm still writing my ideas down right now. That's where I'm at with it. And I am also at the same time working on volume 2 of Guts and Glory. So I've got multiple projects going at once, but this is definitely a priority. And I'll let you guys know. The TB and Associates is probably going to be the first place I go to test this thing out. That in my home group. Dundermoose Bonestein when I'm kind of running a Bonestein at my table. The problem is it seems like my schedule is conspiring against me. But yeah, we'll do a Bonestein sometime. Maybe even using the skeleton system because I want it to be able to do Bronsteins. I don't know. Sometimes it's a wonder I can even talk. Anyway, that's what we got for today. I want to remind everyone one more time, next week is the big one. It's the conversation with Jeff Talanian and returning to Rollin Bones, and we are going to be talking about the work of Clark Ashton Smith. And I will once again read off the list of stories that we will be discussing so that those of you who will be able to join us live will be able to read them in time for next week. So we will be reading The Devotee of Evil, The Flower Women, The Satyr, Mother of Toads, The Charnel God, The Isle of the Torturers, Tale of Stampra Zeros, and The Seven Geeses. So, like I said, next week, Jeff T will be back here on Rollin Bones, the man of Hyperborea himself, and we'll be discussing those stories as well as the greater impact and legacy of Clark Ashton Smith. So, until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. Stay tuned for what will be coming of Guts and Glory and also Project Skeleton as it continues to be built. Till then, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.